So we're going to make some pastry at home as a little kind of interim ways for you to keep up with the recipes that we would have done together in person for possibly a few weeks until we're back on our feet and we're back together in person. I wanted to do a few videos so that way you can give things a go at home and know how they're supposed to look and have a better idea of what it should turn out like in the meantime. And also I have a lot of food in my kitchen that I now need to use up. So we're going to be making pastries and a few things to try to use up some of this food, and my kids and I are going to eat it, or I might share it with my neighbours. We'll see how we go. I am going to send you an ingredients list for the dishes that we do as well, so you should be able to have them all out and ready. We're going to start with a basic shortcrust pastry for our fruit tarts. So our shortcrust pastry only has 3 ingredients, and I've pre-weighed. We've got flour and butter and just some cold water. I've got it in my fridge. So I've got 100 grams of flour in here, and we remember from our classes that when we're making a shorter pastry, we need less butter to flour. So if we want something puffy and something really flaky, which we're going to make for our sausage rolls, we're going to add the same amount of butter to flour, but for our short crust, we've got 100 grams of flour, so we only need 50 grams of butter. And you can see on our butter, whoop, I've got a really big one, it has little intervals already on there. This butter is measured out in 100 gram increments, whereas if you get a smaller butter, it's 50 gram increments. I could probably guesstimate and get 50 grams out of that. I'm going to do half of the 100 gram increments. You can make pastry in a food processor, or you can make it by hand. So we're just going to make it by hand because maybe not everyone has a food processor at home. We've got 100 grams here. I don't quite need that. And we've got about 50 grams of butter here. And what I'm going to do is chop it into smaller pieces first. And that's going to make it a little bit more easy for us to incorporate into our flour. So if you're going to use a food processor or a Thermomix or something at home, you could just put them both straight into the processor. I'm going to use my fingers, clean hands, and just squitch the butter between the flour with my fingers. All I'm doing is focusing on squashing it between. So I'm rubbing and rubbing and rubbing, and you're going to end up with this kind of breadcrumby like texture. So when you think you're done with this, you want to have a good look through your mixture and make sure there's no big bits of just butter on their own. It should look very breadcrumby. So mine's kind of changed colour a little bit from all the yellow butter that's been incorporated into it. And there's no like big bits of just chunky bits of butter. It's mostly all incorporated. These big bits are because I'm kind of squishing it together. So we want it to kind of come together into a dough so that way we can eventually roll it out and make a little pastry with it. So the trick is ice cold water, because we've warmed up the butter with our fingers, and adding the cold water will force the butter to become solid again. So I had some ice in here and then forgot about it, sat out on the bench, and then I popped it in the fridge. So all I want to do is add a tiny little bit. I think I might get a teaspoon, but my hands are pretty dirty. And add it in. Oh, it is cold. Just add maybe a teaspoon into there. Now I've got a mat on my bench just to kind of keep it clean, but you can just give your bench a wipe down and use bench, it doesn't matter. And you can see just from that little bit of water, it's helping to incorporate just a little bit more. Now this is a short crust pastry, so you shouldn't see too many big bits of butter. It should just be quite all the same colour once it's ready. We're going to use this in a fruit tart, and you absolutely could have added a teaspoon of like caster sugar, a really fine sugar, maybe icing sugar into that. Move this out of the way. I just don't have it at home, that's all it is. So this is is our very simple short crust dough. You should see there's no bits of butter visible. I want it to be really, really incorporated, and it looks pretty good. It's quite soft, it's not hard, but it's also melting, not melting. I do have the air conditioning on here. It's a bit of a warm day today, so I've turned the aircon on to try to get the pastry the best possible. What I do want to happen is I want it to go a bit solid because it is quite soft. I'm going to wrap it up just in some glad wrap. Sorry, a little bit. And we're going to pop it in the fridge, and that's just going to force that butter to go solid again and help us when we're ready to take the next step for our pastry. Most people have made custard with me before, so I'm just going to give you a little refresher because we're going to make something called diplomat cream, which is kind of like a custard mixed through whipped cream. It just gives the bottom of your tart a different kind of texture. It's really nice. So what we're doing is we're heating up a little bit of milk and vanilla, and then we're just making a little bit of custard today, so we don't need a lot. We're going to use 1 egg, and we just want the yolk. So I'm going to separate the white and keep it aside for something else. You could freeze it, you can turn it into an omelette, you can make it into meringue, you can put it in friands, there's lots of things. And I want the yolk. The yolk is a thickening agent, so it makes our custard go nice and thick. I'm going to add a little bit sugar. I'm just using raw sugar today, doesn't matter, maybe a tablespoon and a half. And we're going to add some corn flour because our corn flour is our thickening agent. So I've got some basic, maybe a tablespoon, let's do 2. The more corn flour you add, the thicker it's going to be. So if you add a couple more corn flours, it'll be really thick that you can stand your spoon up in it, but I don't really want it all that thick today. So into that, we've got this, our egg yolk and our sugar and our corn flour. I'm just going to mix it together, and it should form like a little paste. And that way we can use that as the basis for our custard. If you buy custard powder from the shop, generally it's this. With some vanilla added in, this dehydrated egg maybe, or an egg powder, or something that will thicken like egg. So maybe double check it if you've got an egg allergy. And then some dehydrated vanilla or some vanilla paste, not paste, like powder. And then mix together. So you've got these ingredients at home, you can make custard anytime. So I've just mixed it together a lot with the flat of my spoon. You can see it's a bit powdery, it's a bit crumbly, but that's okay, that'll work. So I can see that my milk is almost ready. There's some bits of steam coming off the milk. I want to be able to mix it into here with my whisk, but not have this move too much. So what I'm doing is I've got a tea towel, and I'm just gonna make a circle and then pop that on, and hopefully it's not gonna mix around too much. I wanna get all of that egg off there. Let's move that. And then turn the stove off, grab your milk. What you do want is for your egg to be moving the whole time you mix it. So give it a little go. See, my bowl is not mixing around too much. I'm just going to slowly add a little bit of the warm milk. So if we added it too quick, you would cook the egg too much, and then you get more like scrambled eggs. It's not really what you want in a custard. I'm just adding it a little bit at a time and whisking, and hopefully we can whisk all those eggs out. I've got it all in here, but I've popped my pan back on the stove, and what we're going to do is take this and pour it into the pan. So here we're going to turn the heat back on, just on a low, so we don't burn the milk. And we're just going to keep it moving a little bit until it starts to thicken. So I'm just going to keep whisking it, and you will notice that the heat will start to kind of thicken the corn flour. It's already thickening. This is great. Turning it off. So as soon as it gets thick, turn it back off. You can see. I want to put it into just a little bowl. So don't put the bowl on the hot plate where the heat is. Move it over here, and then pouring our thick custard in. So we have our cooked custard here, and what we want to do is cool it down, because we don't want to put hot custard into hot tarts and hot stuff. It all starts to melt. But I don't want a layer of skin on the top of the tart. So the trick is to use a little bit of cling wrap and take it off and just gently press it, because it is hot, into the top of the custard. And then wait for it to cool down before you put it in the fridge. If you put it in the fridge first, you're going to heat everything else in your fridge up. So put it aside for 10 minutes or however long, just for it to cool down first, and then pop it in your fridge until it's nice and cold. So we're making fruit tarts today. You can make lots of different types of tarts, but had said fruit tarts for our week. I have a selection of fresh fruit. You can use any kind of fresh fruit that you like. I would stick to things that are a bit softer rather than something hard like apples, unless you're going to pre-cook the apples. I've got some mangoes, and I didn't make all that much pastry, so I don't feel as though I need to chop up lots of fruit to make lots of tarts, because I don't have enough pastry for that. But I've got mango, and I've got these white peaches, and these are just all locally sourced. So they're really lovely and really fresh, even though they've sat in my fridge for a week while I figured out what we're gonna do. So what I wanna do is just kind of chop them up so they're ready for when we're assembling our fruit tarts. I think that being prepared is the best part, or like the easiest thing to do. So that way, when everything's ready and all of our different elements are cooked, we can just pop it together nice and easily. I really like mango, so maybe I'll stick with this one, or I'll show you how to do the peaches as well. So what I'm going to do is just cut the cheek off the mango. I'm going to keep my fingers out of the way of the knife and tuck them under like a bear claw and cut down the side. I'm going to do that with both sides of the cheek. You could use strawberries, because strawberries are going to come into season soon, and that would be lovely if you just quartered them. You could just use blueberries and use the blueberries whole. That would be great. I'm just going to grab a spoon and get between the mango flesh and the skin. I find it easier with the spoon, and I tend to do it over a bowl, so that way if any of the juices drip out, we can catch them. So I've got most of that skin. Let's get the rest of that skin off. How about we use just a little bowl for our scraps. Right, what I do want to do, mine are a little bit old. They've been sitting in the fridge. You can just chop these older parts out, or use your spoon to kind of scrape them out. I actually think there's not much of an issue with them. And then I know I'm going to want to make it pretty on the top of the tart, so I'm just going to slice mine, keeping my fingers tucked in away from the knife, into thin strips. So go down through it. I think bananas would be good on the tart. You could put some coffee through your custard, and then it would be very kind of banoffee. So we've got some thin strips of mango, and we've got some peaches. I love, love, love white peaches. I think they're just so wonderful when they're in season. So I just ran my knife around the peach and then give it a twist and it comes straight off because they're very fresh. If they weren't very fresh, you'd have to give them a bit of a to get them off. You can use a spoon, don't use a knife, to get in and around the seed. We do want to prevent as many avocado accidents where people are going in with a knife and then cutting your hand. No one likes a cut hand, that's a bad idea. And then I'm going to, let's have a look. Cut it in half, and then you can dice it and have little dice bits of peaches on the top. Maybe I'm just gonna keep cutting them in half until they're a thinness that I really like. So they're really good. So you might notice that as I'm cutting it in half, I'm holding it in place just with my bridge hold and putting my knife underneath my hand so it's away from my fingers. I'm just going to keep cutting it in half. Go slowly if you need to. There's no rush. We're not in a hurry, and you guys doing this at home means that you can take as much time as you need. Right, my fruit is prepped. My pastry is waiting in the fridge, cooling down, and my custard is cooling down. So what we need to do now is roll our pastry out and do a quick blind bake to cook the pastry before we put wet things in it. Pastry looks good. What we want to do is roll it out. So let's move the dirty chopping board out of the way. And I'm going to find some little tins that we can make little fruit tarts in. I like to kind of leave the plastic down because we've already used it, so you might as well make the most of it. And then rolling pin. Add a little bit of flour to the top of the pastry, just coating it slightly so it's less likely to stick to the rolling pin. I do find that if you flour the rolling pin, it just kind of falls off. So what we're going to do is give it a little roll. You don't want it too thin, but you don't want it too thick either. Just going to roll it this way, and then using our batter up, pick it up, move it, and then roll it this way. Most people would have a rolling pin at home. If you don't, you could use a bottle, like a round bottle, bottle of olive oil maybe. See what you've got. I think that's good. That's quite thin. You can kind of pick it up and it looks a bit pliable. So let's have a look at our tins. At the studio, I kind of have everything I need for us to make a lot of things. At home, not so much. I do, however, have these little cake tins. They're going to work. This one's looking a little bit worse for wear. So what I'm going to do is just put a little bit of greaseproof paper on the bottom, just to stop the tart from sticking to the base. So I was just going to cut it into a little square. You could use a tart tin. You can get them from the supermarkets. Or you could just use these. Doesn't even look round. I'm just going to pop this in here, over the top. So that should stop the pastry from sticking to the base. So I'm going to give it a little spray. Pick these up from Woolies or Big W. Maybe Big W, sometimes they're pretty expensive at Woolies. And just use finger to run the oil around the inside. Don't forget the pastry is full of butter, so it doesn't need all that much coating. Now, I've turned my oven on. It's sitting at about 180 on a fan forced oven, just so it can start to get really, really warm for us. What I do want to do is cut out the size of our pastry. So we can use our tins and kind of press down, and that will give us a really good base idea on how big our base should be. You can just use a butter knife and go around the outside of your template now, and then pop them in the base. It's okay if they're a little bit big. Because we're using cake tins, I'm just going to cut a strip of pastry with the back of my butter knife. So then I end up having like a long strip. You could push it together and re-roll it if you really wanted to. I don't think it's necessary, we've already rolled it out as much. We might end up doing that anyway. And then we're going to pop our pastry, if you can see, into our tin and push it down onto base. So I've just used up most of this to go around the side. I did start cutting it down so it doesn't come all the way up the cake tin side. It doesn't need to be quite so high. But just remember, when you're cooking pastry in the oven, it will shrink. So if you make it too small, you might not have any sides up to hold your filling in there. You want it to hold something, so that way it tastes really, really good. What I'm just doing is making sure it's a bit thick. I think I rolled it a little too thin, but that's okay. And look, there's some holes. So I just want to pat it out and make sure it looks all nice and as even as we can get it. We're at home, it doesn't matter all that much. And I'm gonna pop it in the oven for maybe 15 minutes. And we want the base to be cooked all the way through because we're not gonna put it in the oven again. So you wanna keep it in there until it's nice and golden. And then we're gonna fill it with a few yummy things. So these are gonna go in the oven now. Okay, so our tarts are out of the oven. They've been out long enough that I can touch them. They haven't just come out. So they've sat and cooled a little bit. They're nice and golden. That's exactly what we want. So all cooked, the pastry is cooked all the way through. They haven't shrunk all that much, which is really nice. And we're gonna leave them in there for a minute. I'm not in a hurry to take them out. We don't need to take them out too quickly, but we'll pop that to the side. For our cream that's gonna go in the pastries, and then we're gonna have our fruit on top of the pastries. We've got our cooled custard. It's been sitting in the fridge and it's cool enough that I can feel on the bottom that it's not hot anymore. And we've got this little bit of plastic on the top. It stopped it from forming a skin. So that's really nice. And then we are going to fold the custard through some cream. First, you need to whip the cream. I'm gonna add maybe 100 grams of cream into the bottom of a larger bowl. Try not to do it in too small of a bowl. It'll just be difficult. Plain whisk, plain bowl. You can do it on a device. You can do it in a blender. You can do it in a mixer. You can do it in your Thermomix. I just don't feel like cleaning it, so I'm just gonna do it by hand. It just takes longer. And I haven't done my exercise today, so this will be it. Actually didn't take all that long, maybe a couple of minutes. I want it thick enough that you can, without it falling out. So we want to have a nice thick pastry that we're going to put in the middle of our tarts without it, the risk of it coming out. I'm going to keep my whisk here. We're going to put maybe half of the custard in. So custard gives us our flavour for our tarts. So we're going to put half of that in and fold it through just gently. So when we're folding, we're going around the outside and kind of mixing it through the center. It looks really good. It's nice and thick. It's got a good consistency to it. And I think that that'll be plenty for our 2 tarts. Thing is, you have to taste it. That's good. You might want to take them out of a tin before you put the custard or our cream in. It'll be harder to get them out without spilling it once everything is in the tin. So because I've got these little springform tins, it'll be easier for me to take these ones out today. If you've got little fluted custard or fluted tart tins from the supermarket, they should just kind of pop out. So we have our little custard, our pastries that we've made. They look really good. We're going to dollop our diplomat cream into our pastry. And then We can have 1 mango and 1 peach. We can take our mango slices and just arrange them on the top. And then we've got our peach slices. So they started to brown slightly because they would oxidize just being cut and set out. So you could pop them into some water with a little squeeze of lemon in it when you cut them, and that will stop that from happening. And if you make these at home, please make sure you take a photo and share it with me. Get mum and dad to text it to me or share it with me on our socials so you can let everyone know what you've been cooking. Well done.